No, and I think it did prove two things that are quite obvious. Illinois is a lot better than people think they are, and Penn State is not nearly as good as people thought they were. Penn State's going to struggle a little bit with a freshman quarterback. I think you're seeing more of Tate Forcier last year than you're seeing Chad Henne in his freshman year. It's very difficult to be a good freshman quarterback without an elite receiver, and right now there isn't that at Penn State. But I think if you look at how this sets up for Michigan, not the best. You have going to Happy Valley now, where Michigan will be expected to win that game, and being expected to win at Happy Valley with a young team and not a very good defense, that can be kind of worrisome. Then you look at Illinois. That looked like a gimme a couple weeks ago. Now I'm really not so sure.
Didn't David just undersell, though, that this Penn State game? If we've learned one thing over the past couple of years, it's that big stadium, prestigious program on the decline means you have a chance to win that game. I mean, Michigan's not going to walk into Happy Valley and be intimidated by what is now a 3-3 Penn State team.
Still not going to be intimidated, but Penn State at home is still a very good ball club. How they lost to Illinois at home is beyond me. But again, it's the problem of putting the ball in the end zone, and they haven't been able to move the ball. 3 drives of 6 plays, 1 drive of 10 plays. Everything else was 3 plays or less for Penn State. When you can't move the ball, you can't score. Illinois had the ball for 38 minutes and Penn State had the ball for 22. That's the difference in this game. Illinois, 437 yards of offense. Penn State's defense hasn't been the defense that we've seen. It's been an injury-ridden, Robert Bolden struggling season, and it's tough to see, and Evan Royster hasn't been great either, 35 yards rushing.
Against Illinois, too. And finally, another game of note, Ohio State, David, handling Indiana, and as you said before the show, Terrell Pryor, yes, it's Indiana, but still looking a lot better than we thought, at least a week ago.
No, Terrell Pryor has been steadily improving. He did have that hiccup against Illinois. But I think what you're seeing in general with Terrell Pryor and then also with the entire Ohio State team, they're starting to win those games that they should by the margins that they should, with the exception of course, Illinois. And Marshall at the beginning of the season, they absolutely annihilated them. Indiana, who obviously put up a fight against Michigan, either Ohio State's the far superior team or else Indiana's not quite what we expected of them. But needless to say, Ohio State beating teams like they should.
And this week upcoming, Illinois, the surprise team, is going to travel to East Lansing to play the Spartans. We'll see how they handle another athletic quarterback in Nathan Scheelhaus. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. And then Wisconsin, Ohio State, which 2 weeks ago was going to be, the battle for the Big Ten in preseason everyone expected. With Wisconsin's loss at Michigan State, of course, they shift a little bit out of focus. Let's move now to the national scene, guys. And of course, another huge story this past weekend, South Carolina at home, knocking off Alabama. Let's take a look at your revised top 25. Looking a lot different, and yes, that's the truth right there. Ohio State at number 1, Oregon number 2, Boise State number 3, TCU number 4, and Nebraska number 5, who I will credit to the Big Ten in that 5 spot. Let's start, though, guys, with Alabama, South Carolina. Adam, how did Alabama lose to South Carolina? I mean, I know it's Steve Spurrier, but he's been there 5-6 years and only had middling results.
Alabama got down 21-3 in the first quarter. And from there on out, pretty much outplayed the Gamecocks. Alabama did outgain South Carolina. And this is another game where, again, the stats don't really add up. McElroy, 27 for 35 for 315 yards and 2 touchdowns. Is a very good game. But they couldn't run the ball, and that's how Alabama wins games. Ingram and Richardson were held to 61 yards. And that's something that I don't think Ingram has ever been held to less than 100 yards in at least the past couple seasons. And South Carolina, they won the field possession battle. Their longest drive was 63 yards, and they capitalized off of that. And so hats off to Steve Spurrier and that team. And I bet Greg McElroy, I don't know how he's taking this. I fear for Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Of course, Greg McElroy hadn't lost since middle school, which we discussed last week on the show. But I think the correct terminology would be visors off in South Carolina. We're talking about Steve Spurrier, Adam. David, LSU, Florida, our favorite almost Michigan coach, Les Miles, again, insane clock management at the end of the game, and again pulls it off. He's something like 28-4 in games he's coached, decided by a touchdown or less. So for all the crap people give him, is the insanity his strategy just to throw the other team off? It worked 2 weeks ago against Tennessee, and it worked this week against Florida.
Well, let's be honest, who really knows? Les Miles doesn't always make the most sound coaching decisions, and you're not always sure what's going on. In this game in particular, lets the clock run down to about a minute left to kick what seems to be a field goal, but then
53-yard field goal.
53-yard field goal, and then fakes it.
Right, right.
Which gives him even less time to go down the field and score the touchdown or get the field goal that he needs to tie the game. I mean, it's good strategy in terms of you're selling the fake by letting 30 seconds run off the clock. But in terms of actually trying to get down the field and score a touchdown, it's a little shaky. I don't know. I don't know what to think. I mean, Florida didn't look very good in this game. John Brantley had another John Brantley-esque performance, throwing for about 150 yards. So all in all, I think LSU not as good as any other Citronelle team in terms of just sheer record.
Fair enough. I guess hats off to Les Miles. His insane clock management. And you're right, that's something I didn't consider, is that by letting those 30 seconds run off, you really did sell the fake more, because who the heck would let those 30 seconds run off and then fake it? Only Les Miles. All right, and then also on the slate, Miami, Florida State, which is barely even noteworthy. Ja'Cory Harris, David, you hate him. Everyone knows that already. But how about Stanford, USC? And you're going to see this play right now. I wasn't a big Andrew Luck fan, mostly because he's associated with Jim Harbaugh, who I'm not a big fan of because of all his comments in Michigan the past couple years. But watch this. Bam! Oh my gosh, that's a quarterback hitting a cornerback.
My jaw just dropped.
Yeah, your jaw just came unhinged,
goodness.
Adam Brewster. Besides the awesomeness of this play, Stanford also pulls one out, David Nows. Stanford, despite that Oregon performance, is still going to be in this BCS conversation.
I disagree, and I'll tell you why. This USC team that they played, not very good. It took them a last-second field goal to beat them. Andrew Luck had a very good performance. Very good, being over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I believe the number on turnovers is pretty ridiculous. Stanford turned the ball over 3 or 4 times in this one, and Andrew Luck didn't throw a pick. So if they're not going to be able to help out their star quarterback, I don't really know if they're going to be able to they're going to lose a couple more games.
I mean, that's an interesting perspective, except for when you remember USC has a lot of talent. And I don't think anyone would expect a Stanford team to make that many mistakes against such a talented USC team, no matter if they have an idiot for a coach or, if they're not playing so well this year, and win. Period. I guess not convincingly, but still. This upcoming week, BYU, TCU. BYU not what they used to be. Usually that game is a great one. This year doesn't look to be so hot. Texas, Nebraska again. Usually you'd think that'd be a really great game, but Texas, performance. Garrett Gilbert, the John Brantley to Colt McCoy to Tim Tebow. There's 4 quarterbacks there. It didn't all make sense together. You can figure it out at home. Do the math. We have to go to commercial break. Coming back on the other side, we'll talk about our next great hope, which is catching a Stanley ball. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Varsity Blue. David Nows, Adam Brewster, Alex Prasad. Iowa this upcoming weekend, guys. Of course, at the beginning of the year, we predicted the season thus far. I have Michigan winning this game. You guys had Iowa winning. We'll get to our predictions in just a moment. Let's talk about Iowa. Iowa thus far this season, 3 tomato cans, as we were discussing during the commercial break. 2 decent games, traveling to Arizona. By the way, I highly recommend looking up the old man making an obscene gesture to a young Iowa kid. Just go to YouTube. You'll find it. It's just completely ridiculous. Who knew that Arizona fans had such disdain for Iowa fans? Who knew? But of course, so that loss, Iowa really burst their bubble. They were supposed to be a Big Ten championship contender. I suppose they still are. 1-0 in the conference with the big win against Penn State, 24-3 at home. With that in mind, and with Michigan's performance this past week, we turn to this upcoming game against Iowa, David. What is going to be the key for Michigan when they have the ball?
Key for Michigan when they have the ball is simply going to be not turning the ball over. You look at this Iowa defense, and they lead the nation in points per game allowed at 10.2. But you have to take into account that 4 of those games they held the opponent under 10, Penn State being 3, and then their 3 tomato cans they held to 7, 7, and 3 respectively. Arizona put up 34 on them, and that's the one good offense they faced all season. If I had to compare this Michigan offense to either Arizona or one of those 4 other teams, it would be closer to Arizona. I'd say Michigan can probably put up 30 points, 35, but if they turn the ball over like they did on Saturday, you're going to see, 13, 17, somewhere in there. So turnovers are going to be crucial, as they were this week.
My justification for the Michigan win preseason was, in the limited action that Denard Robinson played against Iowa at Kinnick Stadium. Great atmosphere, by the way. The night game last year, of course, tragic results, but it was a good game. Denard was unstoppable. I mean, he ran the ball 7-8 times and 7-8 yards each of the times. So, Adam, are we going to see that again this weekend, or is this Iowa defense all it's cracked up to be?
It'll be a similar situation to last year. It'll be, will Denard restrain himself? Last year, I believe he had 2 interceptions in that Iowa game. They couldn't stop him with his feet. Can he get the ball going through the air like he did prior to this Michigan State game, or will he turn the ball over? I think he'll have a game similar, closer to the Notre Dame or, Indiana game in terms of the success he had. Maybe not, 250 yards, but
right.
It'll be, can Denard not turn the ball over? Because I don't know if Iowa's fast enough to stop him on defense. State set a good precedent of, hey, you stay your lanes and you stay home, you can stop this kid. But
right.
And they've had 2 weeks to prepare.
Right.
But I think it falls more on Denard than Iowa's defense.
As will Penn State, as a matter of fact, because Penn State's bye is this upcoming week. What about the defense, David? Last year, third downs were the key and were just absolutely awful. Do you think Michigan can be able to stop the deep passing game of Iowa? I can't believe I'm saying that. But
I don't think Iowa has a particularly fierce offense. They don't have an elite running back, which does help Michigan. I don't know how many points to expect from this Iowa offense. I do know that Michigan needs the 4 or 5 stops that they got in the Michigan State game, as opposed to letting the team get down the field every single time that they've seen them get played in the game. It's going to be very crucial that they get those stops, and a Stainsy ball or 2 wouldn't necessarily hurt. So I think if you're noticing the theme for me in this game, it's going to be turnovers. Michigan defense needs to get at least 1, maybe 2 turnovers, and that'll go a long way towards winning this game.
that last play, a 3rd and 26, I just die inside when I see it. But do you expect Michigan's defense, I guess the question is, to be more or less effective against a similar offense in Iowa, versus this past weekend against Michigan State?
I expect it to be more effective in terms of the yards allowed to go down, as opposed to allowing 536 yards as they did against Michigan State, because they don't have some of the big play guys like Dell and Cunningham and certainly Le'Veon Bell, Caper,
right.
and Baker. Sorry, but again, I mean, this team has shown that if they collapse on one play, they collapse hard. So I expect less yards, a similar amount of points, though.
All right, running out of time here on Varsity Blue. David Nows, what is your prediction?
Unfortunately, I have to stick with my preseason prediction for the 7th straight game now. It's going to be a close one. I have Iowa winning 31-28. I just don't have faith in Michigan field goal kicking. I think the turnovers are going to be fairly even.
Brewster?
Going to stick with my preseason prediction and go with Iowa, too.
Well, I will be stubborn as well and pick Michigan. I think we've been equally right and wrong so far this year by numbers, but I have a good feeling about this game. That's all the time we have this week on Varsity Blue. Be sure to check back next week when we will be talking about a big Michigan win.